Ladies and gentlemen, friends, colleagues, and listeners, here we are. We were about to do the second part of the show that we did for our anniversary last week, but as everybody, I'm sure anybody living on this planet knows that poor old Prince Philip died over the weekend. So what we've decided to do is just look at the types of leadership and the types of man and the types of values that you can have, even if you're not in the hot seat. So, Steve, sad old weekend, even though I'm not being funny now, I'd sign a contract for 99 and 10 months. I'd sign it right here and now.
I said to somebody yesterday, if I had lived half his life and I get to half his age, I'll have done pretty well. I think even though Philip was clearly a man of, he did lead a life of privilege. I think some would certainly say. I think in his 99 years, Chris, he led life to the absolute full and to the fullest extent.
I agree.
I think nobody had not expected this. I mean, 99 years old in 10 months, just 2 months before His Royal Highness's 100th birthday, which would have been a wonderful celebration. I mean, that would have been quite something to commemorate, and I'm sure there will be some way we can still commemorate that in time to come. But he was a remarkable chap, I think, and nobody had not expected him, obviously at that age, to be vulnerable, and he'd been sick, obviously, in hospital for quite some time before he sadly passed away on Friday. But it came still like a jolt out of the blue. I mean, this really was like a lightning strike coming down. I mean, I've just seen the outpouring, not just in the UK or even in the Commonwealth, but Chris, across the world.
Yeah.
This man touched many, many lives and many, many hearts. And he did so much, I think, in so many different ways that even though he got to 99, we were still hoping he had a bit more steam left in him yet. But you're absolutely right. 99 is, as they say, a good innings. And I think very apt phraseology. Prince Philip was the president of Marylebone Cricket Club, of course, and the bacon and eggs. But a great loss. And I feel obviously very, very sorry, as I think everybody does, for Her Majesty at this very, daunting and difficult time for her and her family.
I think one of the nicest pictures I've ever seen, seriously, ever seen, and I'm just going to put it up and hopefully you'll see it, is this one here. What a lovely picture of somebody who's head of a country and monarch, and the way she's looking at him. I think that says it all. And the fact is, you don't always necessarily have to be the named leader to be a great leader.
No, I think that's right. I think many commentators far more knowledgeable than myself on this subject have spoken over the last really 48 hours, I think, since this news broke, about the relationship between Her Majesty and Prince Philip. And I think it was very much a partnership. I think he was very much self-effacing, and from what I understand from those commentators or those that have worked with him or met him or worked for him, the Prince Philip whom you saw is not always the Prince Philip that you got behind closed doors. He was a very shy individual who didn't take to limelight a great deal. He knew he always had to be 2 steps behind, but he was the supporting act. It's very clear to me that actually we've not just lost, I think, the nation's favourite uncle, as some commentators have sort of referred to him. I think we've lost the supporting act to the very important role that Her Majesty has had to play over the years. The supporting act is just as important as the leader herself. And I think the analogy I've used before is, in football terms, the guy that is off the ball is just as critical as the guy who's on the ball. And Prince Philip, although off the ball, he was as important, I think. And the Queen would recognise that in her famous speech of him being her stay and strength. And that photograph you just showed there was a real example, very touching. I've been quite emotional over the last 48 hours. Prince Philip never knew who I was, And so one could say a personal connection, but I don't think you need to have a personal connection or have met the person to be connected in a real meaningful way.
Yeah, no, I agree, Steve. I think, and people, like you just said, there's very few people who've been lucky enough to meet somebody like that. But for everybody else, he's still been so much because of press, because of what you see with the tours in the old days, you know, when they used to go abroad and they were doing it. But you always seen him as somebody who basically spoke his mind. He didn't let anybody hold him back. But when he was on support duty for the Queen, he was impeccable.
Yeah.
And he was there all the time. And I think to see those sort of values and to see that sort of strength, because it's a huge strength, was incredible. Yet, as we were saying just before we came on, you know, some of the numbers and the facts and figures, 73 years married is a strength in itself. I've told my wife that. I said, my God, girl, that's a long time. 73 years married. Good Lord above.
You've got quite a few years to go then, Chris.
Do you know something? I was just working it out. Hold on, let me just work it out a second. Wait a minute. 30. No, we're 38 years married.
Okay, so
which ain't a bad innings.
So 35 to go.
Yeah, that's what I said to her. I said we're just over halfway. Just over halfway. And then I'm not sure whether my missus looks at it the same way, but she's.
I don't know, Chris, that that we'll ever see a marriage of that. I'm not, you know, putting people down or sort of being defeatist about it. But the reality is, we're unlikely to see a marriage like that ever again. And that's the reality. I think we're unlikely to see a gentleman of Prince Philip's type ever again. Gentlemen like him no longer exist. And it's very telling that, you know, somebody described it the other day as, you know, Her Majesty ran the business and he ran the family. And you can see that in the, you know, he might have not, you know, Prince Philip gave up his career. Of course, he was an accomplished seaman, you know, naval commander who, you know, if His Majesty, King George VI, hadn't sadly passed away in an early death, then, you know, Prince Philip could certainly still have continued his working career in the Navy, as, you know, and somebody said in the commentary the last couple of days, he was a very respected seaman. Yeah. And a very respected commander, and somebody that you wanted to be on a ship with. Let's not forget that Prince Philip himself was in the Bay of Tokyo as the Japanese surrendered. He was there himself on his ship, commanding his ship in 1945. And you imagine the stories the chap would have. I mean, if he had the patience, I suspect, because Prince Philip struck me as a gentleman that didn't suffer fools lightly. And
I love that. I love that about him.
Yeah, I do as well, because it's look, it's people have been told, we have been told by society to become more tolerant, more inclusive. You know, don't always say what you think. You must think first before you speak. Prince Philip never did any of that, and it never did him any harm. In fact, you know, people often criticize his gaffes. I don't think they were gaffes. I think that he was just saying what the rest of us thought.
And he was just having a bit of fun.
I like to describe it as he was stirring the waters, Chris. You know, it's sort of his Navy days. But you know, he had also, you know, come from being a naval commander, I think, you know, with and serving his country and the military, to then becoming an accomplished pilot.
Yes, you know, my God.
And actually, he had his helicopter pilot's license before he had his fixed wing license. He was the first royal to ever take off from the Buckingham Palace lawns in his own helicopter to pilot the aircraft himself. And I was reading about this the other day. It came out in a press release during the Queen's Golden Jubilee, and it had said that Prince Philip had flown 59 different aircraft types, and clocked up something like over 6,000 flying hours, Chris. 6,900 flying hours. Now, I don't know. I've been in aviation for a few years, as have you and many of our listeners. I don't know any pilot today that has flown 59 types. I know many that have flown more than 6,000 hours. I mean, pilots often retire on 15,000, 16,000, sub 20,000 hours on a commercial pilot. But I don't know any that have flown 59 types. That's pretty spectacular in itself.
Yeah, no, he's just an amazing man. And the other thing as well is, I read something, Steve, which obviously, I mean, 59 different aircraft types, etc. 6,000. That's incredible. But I also read that, you know, he had a quite a temper on him. And I read also that the Queen accepted that, and when it happened, she would just even go into another room, just walk away, go into another room, because it didn't take long to calm down. And I love that in him as well, that he was still quite fiery, but she could accept it because of all the other benefits that came with the package. Again, something I remind my wife of.
Well, I mean, you know, you look at it as this real, you know, strong partnership, and you know, the two very strong team players. He knows his place, and the Queen knows her place quite clearly. You know, but even though I don't think he was formally involved in constitutional business, let's say, I think he was certainly, and I've heard, you know, anecdotes from the royal family themselves about how much he'd sort of, you know, tried to guide or provide opinion where it was felt necessary. I suspect on occasion Her Majesty thought sometimes it wasn't necessary, and he was frustrated with that. But look, there's nothing wrong again with showing a little bit of enthusiasm for your subject matter. You know, some would say that's a bad trait these days. Again, and you know, if you go to these leadership trainings or you know, coaching sessions, etc., you would be discouraged from showing your temper.
Yeah.
However, one thing is very clear: is you leave everybody in the room with no misunderstanding about how you feel about something.
That's it.
And I don't think, why must we be so sensitive? You know, these little snowflakes these days. That I don't think that certainly Prince Philip would have suffered the 2021, you know, school of how to be a good team player or a good coach. I think he would have found that insufferable personally.
Yeah. Which I also think sometimes, I don't know why society just seems to go from one extreme to the other instead of a fine balance in between. And you're supposed to be accepting everything, yet people can't accept people speaking their mind.
Yeah, exactly. I remember I saw one video yesterday. Before it became fashionable for the modern young crowd, or the Extinction Rebellion, or these lot that cause all sorts of harm and trouble without actually the substance of the material nature of the being able to grasp what they're talking about. Prince Philip, you know, was a strong conservationist as well, Chris, a strong environmentalist.
Yeah.
He was the co-founder of the World Wildlife Fund, something I had no idea. He was its founding president. And so before all this became fashionable for people to speak about in 2020s, Prince Philip had been doing this for a generation. Yeah. You know, he'd been doing this for 50 years. And
he also had a balance. Because I remember seeing a little snip of something where they asked him, "Are you green?" And he gave a really good answer. And he was just saying, you know, he's saying it's all about balance. And he said, and it's about, and he admitted that it was about money and being able to balance everything instead of just being boom, 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 which people are at the moment.
But that's so pragmatic, and that just sounds so much like him. And that, I think, is where, you know, we speak about in our industry. We're often told that aviation isn't green, and you know, it's we've got to be careful, and you know, how dare you fly? I mean, flying is a sin. There you are, an accomplished pilot, an accomplished seaman, who is also a conservationist. Those things can go hand in hand. I think also, I mean, he was a great lover of sports cars and fast cars, and you know, again, some would say, "Oh, we're burning all that gas to have a bit of fun around the track, or you know, racing through in your Aston Martin through the country lanes of Norfolk." That's not very environmentally friendly. Again, you're absolutely right, because it's a balance. I think if you look what he's done, his stewardship of the royal estates, in particular Balmoral and Sandringham, where he is, you know, looked at the conservation efforts massively. You know, repopulating the royal estates with things like otters and, you know, animals that have been chased out for years. And yes, he got the odd bit of criticism for shooting the stag, you know, during shooting season. but he would view that as being, you know, supportive of conservation in terms
Yeah,
of
yeah,
maintaining population, a healthy population, etc. So I think there's so much there that, you know, we could talk for hours about him. I know you are a fan of the Royals, and I think they've done an immense amount, not only for our country, Chris, in the UK, but actually for the world as a whole. When you look at how many people he touched, I know you'll want to come onto the you know, the opportunities he offered people in terms of training and scholarships, and the Air Guild and the Guild of Air Pilots and Air Navigators,
and the Duke of Edinburgh
and
Award,
also the Duke of Edinburgh Award.
yeah.
Exactly. 6 million people have gone through the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, which I just think is phenomenal.
Yeah, I love both my kids as well. So it's an incredible thing. It's an incredible thing that he did. And for somebody so old, I think he still had such an eye on youth as well. And he was a superb old fella. He's one of the people, you know, they say, who would be the 6 people that you'd have at a dinner party that you could, you know.
Now you can have him because he's sadly now dead.
Yeah, but he's somebody, you know what I mean? I genuinely would love to have him on the table because A, for what he could say, and B, the way he would say it, I think he'd be hugely entertaining and really interesting. Be brilliant.
Yeah, wouldn't that have been? I mean, those that know him closest, I think, you know, had the opportunity to share those stories or that discussion, Chris, or, you know, just a few anecdotes with him. I mean, what a privilege.
And do you know something? I had a friend many years ago, lovely man, and he was headmaster of a school, and he was he fought against apartheid in South Africa. He was Irish heritage. His name was Dermot Gogarty, and I remember at his funeral, his poor wife stood up and she looked around, and it was mobbed, and there was an overflow and everything. And she said something like, Dermot didn't think many people liked him, and it was amazing. And now I think, you know, Prince Philip, if he could see the amount of outpouring of emotion and everything, I mean, I think it's just. Well, I think incredible how you know how he was thought of. It's brilliant. It's just such a shame he didn't get, you know. Well, it's like anybody, you never get to see what the last bit's going to be like. But you know, it's incredible. What an incredible example to everybody.
Yeah, I think that the Prince of Wales said this yesterday, Chris, when he stood outside his outside Highgrove, outside his home, Gloucestershire, and he did say that you know, his father would have been amazed at the level of outpouring and the amount of emotion seen not only from within this country but beyond. But just touching on young people there, I mean, we have, you know, I've always seen it as an obligation, morally and professionally, to coach and bring through the next generation through the ranks and into, you know, skilled employment, and you know, giving people opportunities where they couldn't always sort of engender that themselves. Prince Philip was way ahead of his time.
Yeah,
way ahead of his time, and not only through the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme, Chris, where I listened yesterday to so many youngsters that had met him, had the great fortune at a Gold Award presentation that he did himself. Yeah, he did 500 of those. I mean, just again, incredible. To watch these gold recipients, or those that hadn't met him but had been so thankful for the opportunities that a scheme that he crafted himself, you know, to give them an opportunity and a leg up, and they saw that as sort of material to their success and their careers. And one of the chaps was a guy that you know is Sir David Hempleman Adams, famous British explorer. And his daughter, Camilla Hempleman Adams, who's also a famous British explorer, less famous than her father, but she'll rise through the ranks. But Sir David was speaking yesterday about how, you know, without the Duke of Edinburgh Award scheme that he went through in his early years or teenage years, he wouldn't have got into exploration. And when you hear things like that about how fundamental. That's not only about you know, helping young people, because that's actually about, you know, David Hempleman Adams is essentially an explorer, but he's also a scientist. You know, giving scientists an opportunity to leg up, and there are so many of those anecdotes. And I saw also he was a patron of 800 charities.
Yeah.
Many of them for young people.
Yeah.
Many of them for young people, and you know, whether it's homeless charities, or it's in deprived communities, or they're overseas in the Commonwealth, in Australia, Canada, etc. He seemed to have a connection with all of these things, and I don't suppose he just became a patron for the sake of becoming a patron and ticking a box.
No.
It doesn't strike me as a guy that would just do it if it wasn't in his heart. I suspect that Prince Philip had a very strong connection with all of these charities or organisations that he worked with or was patron of.
Yeah, and the number of official duties that he did, with the Queen, supporting the Queen, but also on his own.
I think I read it was
the schedule was incredible.
I read, I can't find it off the top, but I read somewhere it's something like 37,000 engagements solo, and then of course his other, I think there was a total of 63,000 engagements or something that he had done. Now, if you top that up and go through how many that is in his 73 years of marriage, that's 806 a year. Well, that means on average, the fellas have got 2 meetings per day, every day of the year, for every year of his 73 years. I mean, I don't know anybody that has worked. Some people will question the value of money from the royal family. Let me assure you, that gentleman has earned every single penny of taxpayer funds or support that we gave him to allow the Queen and him to carry out their duties on behalf of the country and the Commonwealth.
Yeah. Do you know something that I've thought about now since this has happened? I've like yourself, right? We've lived in different countries. You get in amongst the culture, you start to know things. But the more time you live abroad and in the different countries, you realise how great the UK is, and also the royal family, and it makes you prouder. I actually think lots of people, or everybody in this country, should be transported for 4 or 5 years abroad somewhere and then see what it was. It's so different when you've lived away.
I can help you pick who those people should be, Chris.
No, but it's a crazy thing, isn't it? I remember thinking, oh dear, and you hear people talking, and then all of a sudden you stand up for the UK and royal family and stuff. And I'm proud to be a royalist. I think they do a fantastic job, brilliant job, and it's like a business. Do you know what I'm saying? They've got an incredible brand. It's had a little bit of a dent in just recently with the little family rift, but if ever there was a message, put what's in first rather than, because you never know when somebody special won't be there anymore.
Well, I think for what it costs, I was having this conversation with somebody just the other day. Prince Philip died, but for what it costs, they asked me, why he's such a royalist, or why is Britain still have a royal family? Well, what purpose does this serve? Well, if you look at the other royal families and institutions of Europe, they all exist. I mean, Belgium, Netherlands, Denmark, Sweden, Norway, etc., etc., etc. But they don't really play a fundamental either constitutional role or ceremonial role.
Yeah.
The role of our royal family, I think, is very different. And the reason it's stayed the test of time, Chris, is because it is fundamental to the fabric of our country. It is material in the way in which it operates. It provides strong interest in the UK, particularly tourism. Sadly, not 2020, but people are fascinated with the mechanics or the magic of the monarchy. And I think for the £2 that each taxpayer in this country pays for the royal family to exist, I mean, I'd pay 200. That's just my personal opinion. Not everybody will necessarily be of the same view, but for me, it's worth every single penny. And when you look at the GDP that the royal family generates, it's phenomenal. I just think back to the time where, you look at big business, big overseas businesses looking at investment in the UK.
Yeah,
I mean, massive strategic investment in the UK, and it's all very well meeting ministers and officials and civil servants or permanent secretaries, and to try to convince these investors to put their money into the UK. It's all very well meeting the Prime Minister. Nothing quite like the magic of meeting a prince or a princess or the Queen or Prince Philip. I think when they wheel out the royal family in these occasions, to solicit investment in our country. I think that must sort of shake the bones of the, almost because of just sign here, because I think that moment is magic, Chris. I don't think it's the same with politicians. Could you imagine that the royal family is replaced with an elected president, some nonce that's been a career politician? I just can't imagine that ever happening in our country. So that's why I think it stayed the test of time.
Yeah, and talking about that and the people that are met, if you just look at the prime ministers that she's met and dealt with, and then you look at all the presidents of the US that she's met and dealt with, and she always, you don't hear anything negative from anybody about that woman.
No.
That is incredible, isn't it? Absolutely incredible.
Phenomenal.
And the way she gives her messages, of her messages, and she's a cracking old lady.
I just hope, Chris, now that she will have the I guess the stamina and the strength. I think she's got the conviction, certainly, but the same man by your side married for 73 years, I think together for 75 or 6 years. I just hope that she will see in herself.
Do you think she'll want to? I think she would want to, but I don't know whether she'd be allowed to or whether she would do. But do you think she'll actually hand over to Charlie Boy so that she sees him, she sees him coronated? Do you think she'll do that?
I don't know.
Huh?
I don't know. No, I don't think she'll do that. No. When I remember her on her 21st birthday, when she made her speech from South Africa, that was so ill-timed, because only a few days later her father, King George, passed away in Sandringham. But when she made that speech on her 21st birthday on her tour in Africa, she committed to serving this country for her entire life, and serve this country for her entire life. She will. Yeah,
it's a strange dilemma, isn't it? Because you just got to look at what's going to come next, and whether they'll be the same sort of. I don't know. It's going to be a very, very transitional time for the royal family, I think, until it passes down to William.
Well, I think. Personally, there is a line of succession, and the heir to the throne is Prince Charles. That will happen. That constitutionally happen. We can't skip a generation, as some people have spoken about. I think Prince Charles will make a fabulous king. Personally, I know he's not certainly any degree got the affection of the British people as Her Majesty does, but I think he is very wise counsel. Somebody said to me yesterday, said, "Oh, but Prince Charles, he interferes in many things." I said, "Yes. Well, what's wrong with interfering in things? Was he right? Yes. Was he trying to stop, development of ugly buildings in beautiful conservation areas? Yes. Is that right? Yes. Do you believe with that? Yes. So what is the problem with Prince Charles interfering? As you say, I don't see it as interfering. I see it him providing wise counsel to his ministers. I don't think there's any problem with that, personally.
Yeah, no, true enough.
I do that because I did want to touch on one thing. I was itching at this to sort of make this comparison between Commander Bond and Commander Philip Mountbatten, because when I look at, I said earlier, I don't think we'll see a gentleman of his fabric and his DNA ever again. He was one of a kind. That generation doesn't exist anymore. Even those that served in the Second World War, there's very few of them. Very few of those veterans left, and we mustn't forget the massive debt that many of them paid for our country, including His Royal Highness. But when you look at these bonds and talk about these young bonds and handsome bonds, and this talk of these new lads now being the replacement Bond for Daniel Craig, I think if Ian Fleming was sitting in the Admiralty, penning his book, who would he want to be as Commander Bond? Well, no better person than a real life Royal Naval Commander himself, but Prince Philip, who of course finished his naval career as Lord High Admiral, the titular head of the Royal Navy. So when if I just reel off this list this is a real life Bond, as far as I'm concerned. He was a real gentleman, I think, to no extent. He was also very handsome and fabulously dressed until the day that he passed away.
Yeah.
He won many times GQ's best dressed gentleman. I mean, his Savile Row tailors must have loved kicking out. But he was handsome. He was a Dane born in Greece. He was blonde. He was a sailor, naval commander. He competed in Cowes Regatta. He completed cross-Atlantic sailings in yachts. He was a pilot, firstly a helicopter pilot, then a fast jet pilot. He then became a commercial aircraft pilot. He competed on motorbikes. He was an accomplished horseman. He competed internationally as an equestrian until he was 85 years old. He played polo, which he gave up at 50, and then took up carriage driving. He wrote the rule book for the international sport of carriage driving that is now there. He formed that as an official sport. He was a crack shot, great shoot as far as I can see. He was an explorer. He was a conservationist. He was also a painter. He was a writer, and somebody that I don't think we will ever see again, Chris. So if those qualities that I've just reeled off there,
yeah.
I think also one of the great qualities of being a Bond was being a little bit of a womanizer. Now, I wouldn't like to suggest that The Crown was anything but fiction. It was a story, but there were certainly a few stories of Prince Philip in his earlier days of being a very handsome young man and very attracted to lots of beautiful young women, I suspect. But who wouldn't if you were after a real life Bond? Then I think Prince Philip fitted the need.
I think you're right. I think you're right. A very dashing Duke, and James Bond's title would, if only he could slip in and out of places without being recognised. He's definitely got the characteristics and the equipment and the toolkit for a Bond character.
I saw one photograph of him yesterday in the newspaper. He was talking to Gwyneth Paltrow, and she was on these.
Great big high heel shoes.
Big high heels, and he was in the Arts Club in London. Which of course he was the patron of. The Arts Club is actually less to do with the arts, I suspect, and more to do with popping along for a.
And he liked a beer. He liked a beer. Yeah.
He liked a beer. No, never wine. But I'll tell him to wine in a second. But he was leaning against the balcony, talking to Gwyneth Paltrow, looking up at her. But of course, she had these massive heels on. Prince Philip's a 6 foot tall gentleman, so he's no leprechaun in stature, but you could just see him looking up at Gwyneth, and he looked so relaxed in the company of this young blonde. I thought, well, good on you, sir. 85 years old, I think he was when that picture was taken. But definitely a beer man, Chris. I read an anecdote. He was in Italy on a tour with Her Majesty, and they offered him some fine Italian wine, and he said, "Wine, bloody wine! I want a beer. Just get me a bloody beer." Any beer. Yeah, you saw that. Any beer. But no, you wine. Yeah. So nice. He was a man's man, I suspect.
100%. And I also, someone was talking to him about aircraft and noise and pollution and everything. And he said, you don't have to tell us. He says, we live in Windsor Castle. He says, we're directly below everything that flies over. But that's going to be a hell of a service now next week, huh?
Well, it is, and I think from what I understand, he did not request a state funeral in any case. He was very adamant that was not to be the case. But I think I hope that the public can participate virtually or in some way, meaningful way, because whilst Prince Philip wanted a smaller affair, and probably the guise of COVID over this helps keep this to be a smaller affair, which probably suits His Royal Highness well. I do think there are elements that the public would like to be exposed to or be participate in, but really the outpouring of grief has been phenomenal. It's incredible, isn't it? And I think it's ironic. Would this have happened to him if it hadn't have been for COVID? Would he have lasted? How much effect did it have on him? Being separated and then all the pressures. So I mean, at the end of the day, now the royal family have been so affected as well by COVID. It's incredible, amazing. Well, no doubt, Chris, that his death robs our country of one of its most colourful figures that will be very, very difficult to replace. And no denying he will leave a big hole in public life and to the royal family.
Yeah, and it's a weird thing that, like you mentioned earlier, he's Greek born, Danish origin, all sorts of mix. Yet he epitomised, I think, everything that everybody likes, respects of British just culture and British personality and speaking out, sense of humour, all the things that they love. He epitomised the whole.
I think he fitted in so well. He had no easy start to life. I mean, being evicted, if you like, from Greece, put in an orange box and sent out to sea to meet a ship, that he was then taken onto, and sort of, as the Greek royal family were exiled. I mean, phenomenal story. To then end up, being married in the most successful of marriages in the world, bar none, to one of the world's most famous women in the world's most famous royal family. I think if that is an inspiration for anyone, starting out with some of those challenges that he had to where he became, and how he not just fitted in, but actually he drove and determined a lot of what being British meant. I think that is no bad thing.
It is, you're right, and a great lesson to so many people that you can fit in, you can still be yourself, you can conform, but you can still rebel. You can be serious, but you can still have a sparkle in your eye and a bit of fun. You can do so many things and not feel as if you're not equal to anybody. And I don't think he ever felt he wasn't equal to any man standing anywhere, even though he was, number 2 in line to the Queen.
Yeah.
As far as support, it must have been strange though, mustn't it? Going, having a cup of tea at night and saying goodnight to the missus, and she's got all the secrets, and you're not even allowed to know any of the secrets. But then again, that's also part of the personality. I don't think he would be worried about it either.
I think he would rather not.
He'd be happy. Yeah. I'll have another beer and get to bed. Yeah, that's it. I'll watch. Yeah, you carry on with that, darling. Yeah.
Signing her papers. Yeah.
Here's my pen in case your one runs out. Yeah, I'm just going off to watch a bit of telly. No, but fair play to him. What a great man. Great royal family. Very, very good. And it'd be nice now if it just pulled people a little bit together again and stopped all this rubbish that's going on everywhere and made people be a little bit more sensible with what's important in life.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't the follow-up to the show that we were expecting, Steve. And next week we'll focus again back on the positives of this last year. And obviously he's a huge positive, bit of history now. And also our T-shirts, BBBB. Bring Britain back better. It's on the rise again, mate.
Very good.
On the rise again. God save the Queen. And hopefully Q in the background there, Salem, has got all the technical bits and pieces now for next week. So we might be able to show our T-shirts and maybe even a beverage or two, who knows. And we should start thinking of what are the positives for last year and maybe make it.
Well, we can maybe next week, I think His Royal Highness' funeral is on Saturday at 3:00. So I think we'll probably just to preempt James
Wyatt on his run.
To preempt James, the show will not be out on Saturday, James. It will be a Sunday release, whereby we may well drink a toast to the Duke of Edinburgh.
100%. Nice fitting way to end, mate. Yeah, God bless him and all the rest of them. And but it's also a celebration, isn't it, of such a wonderful fella.
Yeah. I don't think he'd want as many tears. I mean, I've spoken to lots of friends over the last few days and family, and they all have told me about stories of them being in tears and sort of not being able to explain why they were in tears at a man they'd never met. But that just shows the strength of feeling, and I think the Duke would be surprised by that if Prince Charles is comment to anything to go by. So yeah, we should drink to a wonderful man and celebrate a wonderful life and some wonderful accomplishments that have touched many, many people the world over.
Yeah, and the press, especially the British press, should focus on all those positives, because there's been so many negatives about the man. And when you see the pictures of every age, colour, creed turning out to pay their respects to somebody, I think that should be making people think, where should we be spending our time and our effort in the future?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, to James Bond.
Not James Wyatt.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah.
From one James to another.
Exactly. No, but seriously, thanks again, mate. And we'll see you next week. And we'll cover the positive things after 2020.
Thanks a lot.
All right. Lovely as always, Steve. Take care of yourself. We'll have that drink next week virtually. All the best.